Good afternoon, and it's good to see you. We're wrapping up what we talked about last week, which was some of the romantic piano and song. Today, we'll finish song and then move into the piano. Kind of brief, mostly talking, a little bit of playing, more in the actual place where we share sound from. Okay, so I gotta get my thing going here, and we'll do that. So come on. Okay. We've wrapped up with Franz Schubert the other day in our last session. And just like I've been saying, you might just want to pull out a little email, get an email ready, or pull out a piece of paper, and so you can jot down a couple things as we go along. I'm going to mention those to you, and just so that I know that you're watching and you've sat through this and know what's going on. So if you're sitting here with me, that's great. You've done that. You're listening. If you're sitting at home listening to this, you know what to do. You don't know what to do, I will tell you what to do. But before we do that, here's Robert and Clara Schumann. Robert, 1810 to 1856. Clara, 1819 to 1896. 1810 to 1856 is 46 years old. We find that he did have some health issues later on. They were both musicians, both wrote a lot of songs. And the way that this lecture is divided is that I talk first about the songs, and then I talk about songs in terms of singing, then talk about the piano compositions. So both Robert and Clara pop back up in the second portion, specifically related to the piano. Okay. In terms of what happened in music, their relationship is one of those most significant things where they grew together, learned, shared. That was great fun. He was the son of a writer and a book dealer. He studied with Friedrich Wieck, V-I-E-C-K, Wieck. A little bit about German pronunciation. Just when you have two vowels together, like in Friedrich, I-E, or in Wieck, I-E, the second vowel is the one that you pronounce the way that it would be. So if it was F-R-E-I, it'd be Friedrich, but it's F-R-E-I-E, the E is second, Friedrich. W's are V's, and that's just a couple of simple rules. There's a lot more to German than that, but that'll make you sound at least like you know half what you're talking about. He was the person who founded the New Journal for Music, the Neue Zeitschrift für Musik. Zeitschrift, because the E is before the I there. And his wife, Clara, was the daughter of his piano teacher, Frederick Roberts' piano teacher. She was one of the leading pianists of the times. They had some issues, some lawsuits going on, problems with their in-laws. And Robert and Clara got married, started concertizing, eventually became committed to an asylum due to mental instability, and that led eventually to his death at the age of 46. Wrote tons of stuff, though. Over 300 piano works, 300 songs, which is generally a piano with voice, although the accompaniment could come in other variations. He did write some for orchestra, mostly for the piano. a lot of those songs were love songs to his wife, Clara. And he was one of the first artists who became a concert pianist. He and his wife both played a lot of concerts. Not that they were the first to be a concert pianist, but they were the first really to make a living off of that. Between their composing and their playing, were able to live quite well. His songs mostly about love, which is a pretty lucrative genre, and so people paid for that. One of his collections, A Poet's Love, 1840, Dichterliebe, and Lieb is the song. The Dichter there is the dictation person or the poet, and it's a series of 16 poems from Heinrich Heine's lyrical intermezzo. You'll find that a lot of composers would take poetry that's already out there and set that to music, and in many cases collaborate. We see that a lot, especially in music for the church, where we have Fanny Crosby writing with Philip Doane or Peter, or whatever his name is. And there would be these links of lyricists and composers working together to create music. Heinrich Heine is one of those guys who wrote some great poems, and Robert and Clara set those to music. She wrote several collections of lieders. Lieder, again, is just the German word for song. Lied is the word for song. Lieder is the plural of that. And her approach is very much like her husband's: long piano preludes and postludes, and then the song, and then voice and piano equal, convey images and the feelings of the poem. So the piano is not just a ostinato like we had in the previous century, but the piano is actually performing a collaboration. In fact, if you were to be studying piano at a major university, they would be asking you to move toward either accompanist or collaborative pianists. And when you're looking for a pianist for your choir or for your solo recital, you want to be looking for my personal opinion is that you want to be looking for a collaborative pianist who feels like the music is written so that there are equals between the pianist and the singer. An accompanist just does what's on the page, just what is told to do. And when you spend time with these people, you can tell that there's a difference between somebody who is an accompanist and somebody who is a collaborationist. And Clara Schumann wrote for the collaborationist on the piano. We're not going to spend a lot of time on much of her music or Robert's. We got a lot of ground to cover today, so I got to start talking faster. I'm sorry. Several other composers during this time that wrote songs for voice: Felix Mendelssohn, Fanny Hensel. Fanny was Felix's sister, who then married Hensel later on. Franz Liszt, we'll talk about it in a second. Schoenberg. Arnold Schoenberg we'll come back to in a little bit. I mean, in a few weeks, so we're not going to spend much time right there. Richard Strauss. Let's move on. In North America, we had really what was called parlor songs, and this was partly due to the rise of the piano and the commonplaceness of the piano, where people could buy one and put it in their homes. We talked about that a series or two ago. You could buy a piano, put it in their home, and then sit around or stand around at night playing piano and singing songs, playing piano and playing their flute, playing other instruments. So it really became something for the home, as well as, or instead of, for the concert hall or for the church. They used it in other songs, other venues as well. But it was in British and North American music, mostly done for the parlor, for the home. One of those, Henry Bishop, Home Sweet Home, Canada, James Clark, in the United States. Stephen Foster was one of those guys who wrote a lot of music that if I were to play some for you, you would recognize. You could say, oh, that's Stephen Foster. In fact, here is John somebody singing, Oh, I Dream of Jeannie. Again, we're not going to listen to all of this, but
I dream of Jeannie with the light brown hair, born like a vapor on the summer air. I see her tripping where the bright streams play, happy as the daisies that dance on her way. Many were the wild notes her merry voice would pour, many were the blithe birds that warble them all.
oh, we're going to leave it there. No,
Drinking
stop. I don't
ice water.
want to get rid of that. And we're going to leave you with that right there. Okay. American minstrel songs were those songs that were written for and played for the stage. A lot of German lieder, Italian opera, Irish folk songs during that time as well. All right, so that concludes last session's and this first part session discussion about song, that is the early romantic song. Moving into early romantic piano music. And the piano works really were for a variety of reasons. You see graded studies start to come out, and that's kind of like some of you study piano now and you have Alan is a series or Bastian is a series. When you take piano pedagogy, if you're a pianist and you take that, then you'll learn a bunch of these different processes or books that help you teach students on a progressive level. Also, etudes come into popularity, and etude is really, it's the French word, I think, for study. Etude is study, yeah. I have a French expert here correcting my language if I get off track. And so those are works that are written to be studied and that are designed to help you on a particular thing, to increase your ability on that particular thing. As you study etudes, that becomes more apparent. You begin to see, oh, this one's about this arpeggio progression, or this one's about this scale progression, or whatever. Etudes have a purpose for you to study those. Also, then piano works for amateur enjoyment and some for public performance. Not quite as many for public performance, although those are starting to rise. Schubert works for that market, the amateur market, those people that are playing at home. And so some of his music is more accessible, easier to play, is what that simply means. Wrote 11 piano sonatas. Felix Mendelssohn was a romantic composer, a German romantic composer. Mendelssohn wrote a lot of piano works. He also wrote some orchestral and other works. And he, again, and his sister was Fanny. His grandfather was Moses Mendelssohn, who was a Jewish philosopher. So Felix has that Jewish heritage in his background in Germany. 1809 to 1847 are his dates. 1847, 40, so 38 years old. He was at Dusseldorf and in Leipzig and some other places. founded a conservatory in Leipzig. One of his collections is the Lieder von Worte, which is the songs without words. 48 short priests, 8 different books, and it's some of his best known works. He expanded on this idea that music can express feelings that words cannot. We got that from Ambrose in the 3rd century. We've gotten that all along, and it's the representative of the pendulum swing in the classical era. Music was very structured and designed to support the text. Here in the Romantic era, the music is what is moving our emotions, and it's working outside of the text. Hence song without words. For example, this mazurka from about 8 tunes. See the arpeggios. And it goes back, and we go on. So you've heard me say at some point in your studies here that all of music is scales or arpeggios and rests and variations thereof. And that was an example of a bunch of arpeggios played under scales by Schumann. All right, he wrote over a bunch of titles. Carnival, let's move on a bit. Let's skip a bit, brother. Because we want to get on and we're running out of time. Clara Schumann, again, the wife of Robert, and Fanny Hansel. Remember her name, Fanny? Well, she was a Mendelssohn, and then she got married to Hansel, which we'll see in just a second. Clara was a fabulous pianist as well as composer. Clara Schumann, who was Clara Wieck, or was it Wieck? Wieck. And they collaborated on some stuff, wrote a lot of polonaises, waltzes, preludes and fugues, character pieces, and sonata. And you say, what is a polonaise? Well, it's a dance. It's a dance form from the islands. I can picture them, but I can't come up with a name. The polonaise, the waltz is also a dance form. Isn't that incredible? Preludes and fugues we would have talked about in other classes where we studied how those are written, composition class. Okay, here we go. Fanny married Wilhelm Hansel, the painter, and she played piano, presented her own compositions, 400 plus works. She's not as well known as her brother Felix, but she's as prolific a writer as he is. So if you were going to do a paper in the second half of the semester, that might be one of those things. You could compare the works and accomplishments of the siblings, Felix and Fanny. Just a thought. Clara and Fanny, Das Jahr, the year 1841, and then Friedrich Chopin coming in. Now, in my studies with French, I saw a little clue one time that if a word ends with anything but a certain four syllables, you don't, four consonants, you don't say that consonant. You have to be careful not to say the consonant. And according to what I learned, those four consonants are C, R, F, and L. If it doesn't end in one of those, then you don't say it. So for example, Chopin, Chopin, you wouldn't put the N on that. Is that correct, Mr. French expert? So it really would be Chopin with not necessarily the N in there. Just one of those little, I got all kinds of hints. Can't for the life of me speak a lick of French well. Everybody rolls their eyes when I do it, but I know some rules. All right, so he was born in actually Warsaw, which is Poland, but he has that French background. He studied in Warsaw, some in Vienna, Italy, Germany, and fled that area after the political people that he was supportive of failed in a revolt. And so he went to Paris and spent much of the rest of his life there. Major works: 2 piano concertos, 3 piano sonatas, ballads, scherzos, nocturnes, again, types of dances, etudes. He's well known for etudes that really help people develop some specific skills. One of those guys that music doesn't look hard, but man, you really have to work to get it down. But once you get it down, man, it sounds so sweet. So his preludes, Opus 28, cover all of the major and minor keys. It's one of those that's written for students to help them figure out and master all of the different major and minor keys. We're going to listen to a little bit of a piece that I wrote here in a minute. Let's get to it. Well, here we go. This is Mazurka. I think this guy will tell you what he's playing. Yes, he will.
This B-flat Mazurka Opus 7 number 1 is a real favorite. It's a favorite among audiences. It's a favorite among pianists. And it was a tremendous success at the time that it was published, and rightly so. The accents and the rhythm of the mazurka is really inherent in this piece. It's a real Polishness that you hear that is remarkable in this piece. And I'm looking forward to sharing it with you.
And it goes on from there. He told you that it's a favorite among piano listeners, piano audiences around the world. Just as a clue as to how much I listen to piano, I had never heard that piece until he played it for me on YouTube. So I'm obviously not a piano audience person. True that. But it is fun little mazurka. You really get the sense of that um, Eastern European character in there. We're gonna skip a bit more. Franz Liszt. Franz Liszt. Most Electric, I mean, he was known for his virtuosity. One of the things that set him apart was that he had a particularly wide finger span and could play some really ridiculous combinations of chord stuff. And he wrote some of his music accordingly, which makes it particularly difficult for younger players who don't have the full hand span. Some older players that don't have that wide of a span either. Again, hundreds of solo recitals throughout Europe and Russia and all around, writing all types of stuff, borrowing from people. Niccolo Paganini was a guy who played violin, and they did some collaborations together. Where am I on the list? That's what I get for not following my thing. I could have. Okay. Anyway, he used a thing called the crossover in his composition. You'll see that here on this piece where he's playing this flowing arpeggio, and as you're watching the music, you'll see that he comes in with the melody up here, and his hand crosses over to hit particular notes. When he's playing the upper part of the arpeggio, it's in his right hand, and the notes get played with his left hand in the melody. When he's playing the lower part of the arpeggio, it's in his left hand, so the pinky goes up and hits the melody. But that left hand coming across is called a crossover, and Liszt is known for that technique. And that's enough of that. We're really looking at the crossover technique there for that one. Gottschalk is an American composer who wrote for the piano 1829 to 1869. And we haven't really set any standards so far for sitting stuff in. Just go ahead and real quick take a moment, press pause if you need to write down or put into your email those dates for Franz Liszt and when he was alive, and then those dates for Louis Gottschalk. And while you're at it, if you can remember where Franz Liszt is from, or look it up. And then, of course, Gottschalk is an American composer, so you can put down that he's an American composer. Send those two things to me in your email, and that'll help me know that you got this far in the tape and watched it. That's just so clever of me. He toured Europe a lot, born in New Orleans, and was influenced a lot by Puerto Rico, the Caribbean area. We'll listen to this and you tell me. March of the one is about El Salvador. Got marching sensations. It was some of these guys missed shooting on expansion of music into an international venue, international touring process, and just being known throughout the world for the music that they were writing. This is in contrast to a movement that's also taking place at about the same time of nationalism. Now he's writing that song about the El Salvadorian whatever. Chopin was writing Polish influenced songs. Liszt was writing influences from his. All of these guys are writing influences from their own backgrounds, and there's a rising interest that we'll look at in another session pretty soon, a rising interest in the folk music of particular countries and composers putting that music to score and passing it around. We also see at this time the beginnings of technologies that reduce that home music making. Late 1800s, bicycling, the radio, the phonograph comes out late 1800s. And what we see starts to become a separation of what is popular music and what is art music. Remember, at some point in our discussions, we talked about three types of music: art music, popular music, and folk music. And the distinction with the rise of these technologies that put things like the radio in homes, we start to see the distinction between those three types of music. And so we're kind of moving now in this middle of the Romantic era. We're kind of moving more toward what becomes known as art music. Okay. Let's see if there's anything else in here. So you're going to send in that email that lets me know that you were here listening and participating, and we'll pick up that discussion in our next session. Au revoir.